Roddy, a lot of workers in the farming world are coming from overseas. Now that opens problems if one of them has a moment and dies.
Yeah, look, we get a lot of international visitors over here, and so first up, from an ACC point of view, if somebody dies in an accident, then there's some support from the government.
Yep.
If, however, they die of a medical cause, heart attack, old age, whatever the cause may be, if it's not an accident or deemed to be an accident, then you're on your own, and that has always been the case. And so in New Zealand, we don't have compulsory insurance. Whereas you go to the US, you'd be absolutely foolish to travel without full repatriation cover or funeral cover, whatever the case may be, because it's exceedingly expensive. And in fact, many situations, if you are working around the world, they will require you to have a proof of insurance. My wife has a company that deals with recruiting teachers into the UK, and the national health now is not automatic for New Zealand citizens, where 2 years ago it was. Nowadays they have to lay down, they actually essentially have to pay a premium once they arrive. It's about £300, but that is their ticket into the national health system. Now we don't have a similar situation here. So if you're employing, say for example, a situation we've dealt was a Filipino worker into a dairy farm, and they died of natural causes.
Yep.
The repatriation cost around about $11,000, including some funeral work here as well. But that was because they were going to have a full, proper Catholic funeral in Manila with the family of the deceased person. Now, this particular individual was married to a New Zealander. However, the status of their visa and everything else meant that there was no support from the government, and so the costs all fell to the family. The good news in this scenario for us and for the family was that they had a proper insurance scheme. They had a life/repatriation cover scheme that they had purchased in the Philippines, because the Philippines sends so many workers around the world, they tend to be on top of it. They're used to do it, and they also know, because there is a cultural imperative to return the deceased to their homeland and to return them as a body, as opposed to ashes, that people are. But we've got people coming from the Pacific, we've got people, well, even Australia. It's a lot cheaper to hop on a plane through the front door than it is through the cargo hold.
Right.
And so if you had somebody living in Australia, the same situation applies. There's no support from the Australian government if you die in Australia and you're working in Australia.
Would it be fair to suggest that a lot of these immigrant workers, their families couldn't afford to fly them home?
I think if you were to make a generalisation in regards to the Pacific, all of folks that come in from Niue, from Tonga, from Samoa to work the vineyards, to work the fruit picking season, absolutely. They're sending every single dollar they're earning back home to support their families, and a $10,000 bill to repatriate an individual back to the Pacific isn't going to be something easy. And we've dealt with that a number of times where family members have been put under immense stress. The sad thing about it is the cost of a policy at that level, a life policy at that level, is as cheap as chips. We're talking a couple of bucks a day or less, and in some situations it might be $7 or $8 a week. Money that is less than a net hour's work a week, and that would cover not only their costs of their a funeral director and the repatriation, the airline, etc. here, but would go a long way to also putting some money back into the family coffers, because they've lost obviously a primary earner. They're out here for a reason. So where the government is encouraging people, and they are encouraging, because there's no legislation regarding compulsory insurance at this stage, but where they're encouraging people as employers to take up that role and to source a suitable policy for their employees and offer it as part of a package. Whether they subsidise it or take it out of the wages, that's between the employee and the employer.
Yeah, that's a separate contract.
That's a separate contract, but it is of, put it this way, I have insurance agents approaching me who want to do collective agreements for my team, for my staff here in New Zealand. And there are collective agreements where a corporate policy, for want of a better term, that covers all employees of an organisation, whether it be a dairy farm, whether it be a fruit growing operation, whether it be a funeral home, those policies are actually very cost effective, and from a business perspective they're tax deductible, they're a benefit to the employee, they help with employee relations, they take a level of worry out, and if they're done right, the chances of them are being claimed are quite low. We know this, But also, because the chances of them being claimed are low, the cost to them is quite low. Unlike, say, earthquake insurance or anything like that, which is now obscenely expensive, life insurance is actually falling backwards.
So, I mean, basically, broad acre, I guess, but what are people up for if somebody like a Filipino isn't covered?
Okay, I think if you got out of it for less than $12,000, then you'd be doing well. But I've had repatriation bills that have pushed $20,000. It all depends on which airlines are flying through which airports.
And farmers don't need that as a...
Well, no, and I'll give you an example. We had a worker that actually, this was a couple of years ago, had to be repatriated through the Middle East. And there was 38 hours worth of flying, there was 3 different airports, and there was 3 different airlines. The level of the cost, each airline clips that ticket on a per kilo rate. And Singapore Airlines was involved. It was $38 a kilo. The casket alone weighed 160 kilos. Do the math in your head. That was just one leg for Singapore Airlines, and that was from Sydney up to Singapore. And then there was another leg, I can't remember the exact flight, but the point is that if you are coming from the other side of the world, if you are from anywhere on the European side of things, the cost is going to be very, very high. Also, some of the third world countries still require quite extensive embalming work, tin line caskets, hermetically sealed. They've got a lot of regulations. IATA, the International Airline Travel Association, they have quite stringent rules but they vary distinctly on the zones that you're flying to. So if you don't know the answers to these questions, they're very straightforward. Ring a funeral director and find out, because there's nowhere we haven't sent somebody, or within our association, someone will know what the hoops are to be jumped.
Potty, thank you very much indeed.